The information contained in this video is intended for educational purposes. We are not responsible for any damage to your device resulting from improper disassembly or installation. Proceed at your own risk.
This is Mike from GoCellPhoneRepair.com, and today I'm going to show you how to remove the screen from a Galaxy S6. This is not a complete repair video, but really dealing with this phone, if you're not able to reverse these steps and put the screen back on, you probably shouldn't be working on it. There are some places in here where you can have some trouble, so please view the entire video before you attempt this repair. I'll be doing an updated video very soon, as well as a drop test on a brand new Galaxy S6. So check back for updates. For the time being, for those of you that are really anxious to take your phone apart or you have a repair that you have to perform, I happen to have one come in the other day, and this is how it went down. So you want to take a look here at the bottom left-hand corner. We've got a few minor cracks down there. The thing is, this actually makes it a little more difficult to work with because you have to be really careful when the glass comes off all at once. And normally it's a little bit different if you're dealing with an S3 or an S4 or even an S5, but on this one, it looks like they might have used an OCA sheet in order to bond the glass. I was going to try to remove the glass. You'll see later on how that went. Anyways, go ahead and start by powering off your phone, removing the SIM card, and then the first thing we're going to do is take the back panel off. Fortunately, this is pretty easy to do. You'll definitely want to heat it up. It's got quite a bit of adhesive on the inside, and you can kind of assume the adhesive is going to be shot when you get done, so you'll want to have something to replace that with. I use the red tape adhesive around the perimeter of the back panel after I took this off. If you get lucky and you can pry right on top of the adhesive, you can get the panel off, but it covers some of the screw holes on the inside, so you're going to have to at least peel it out of the way in order to access those screws in the back panel. So what I did is I started here with the razor blade, just kind of straight in. You want to get under the glass, but you want to be really careful not to scar it. So this is a dulled razor blade, and as soon as I can kind of get in here, and I ended up going in with the corner just a little bit, which I really hate to do. What you don't want to do is run a piece of metal up and down the edge of glass or metal because it tends to leave a lot of marks. So as soon as you get this to lift up a little ways, you want to switch over to a softer tool. Again, you'll see that I keep hitting it with the heat just to keep it nice and warm. It makes the adhesive much easier to work with. All right, so we'll just switch over to a very thin guitar pick. I believe this is about a 0.43 millimeter. I'll have to check on that. And continue heating, and then you can just kind of work your way around the perimeter. You don't need to go in very far. There's just a thin layer of adhesive that goes around the edges here. So I'm going to speed up the camera here just in a second, but you can kind of get an idea that I'm working at a very slow pace here, just very carefully. And I actually went around the perimeter a couple times because it tends to stick down a little bit as you're working with it. So just go in here, I mean, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so. You don't have to go in very far. And just use some patience, keep it hot. You don't want to lift up on this and put a lot of tension on the back because you can crack it. And again, with something like a plastic guitar pick, you don't have to worry about scratching up the phone. And then as we get around here, you'll see that it starts to lift up. So again, apply some heat. There is adhesive around the center part of this also, but it's not going to give you much resistance. So as long as you get under here and just kind of lift on this very carefully, you should be able to separate it without too much effort. Again, the heat is the key. Right, so you can see that most of this adhesive is still intact, but again, we're going to have to remove it in order to get to the screws. And a very common question that people ask me is, will my phone still be as waterproof or as water resistant as it was after I take this adhesive off? And the answer is no. Phones are a little bit like cars. The moment you drive them off the lot, they're never going to be brand new again. And the moment you crack your screen, it's definitely not going to be as resistant to moisture as it was before. So no, but if you use a good adhesive, and we'll probably have some pre-cut adhesive available here in the near future, you can get it pretty close to factory specs. But you can see this is cut out to fit in a very specific layout on the back of the phone. So it's really hard to get a hold of something like that unless it's already pre-cut. So hopefully somebody will come up with an aftermarket version we can use. And I believe we've got about 13 screws here on the back, all of which need to come out, all of which are the same size. So we'll go ahead and speed the camera up again. All right, the next thing we want to do is heat up the wireless charging receiver here on the back of the phone. It's got some adhesive that kind of goes down the sides, and it is going to stay with the rear housing when we remove that from the rest of the phone. So warm this up a little bit and then take something very thin and very carefully go in from the center, and you can kind of just lift up and work your way around the edges. Don't let the card slip because you could actually slice through this if you're not careful. But it's pretty easy to get off. This is much easier than dealing with the screen once we get to the other side of the phone. All right, so I'm just going to kind of set the card inside here as a placeholder so it doesn't stick back down again. And then we're going to heat up and be very careful. There are some cables that wrap around the bottom end of the phone here, kind of like the Galaxy S5. You do not want to cut through those. I got very lucky that I didn't cut through them because I hadn't worked on this phone before. So again, a very good argument for a shallow pry when you're going around the perimeter, but please be careful on the bottom. You don't want to have to replace those cables. If you do, you have to wait to install the screen until you have the replacement cables. So you'll see them coming up here shortly, and this is why I always recommend people watch the entire video before they attempt the repair. Now, after we heat up the phone, there's quite a bit of adhesive around the edges, so you really have to work on this. And again, be real careful down there at the bottom and just kind of go around the perimeter. There's a thin layer that goes right around the edges, and once we break through that, it'll make things a lot easier. You'll also notice there's some sort of antivirus protection on this phone, and once I hit the power button, I could not turn the phone off, so that screen's going to stay on until I disconnect the battery. Kind of weird. I guess that's some sort of safeguard maybe in case your phone gets lost or stolen. But you can see now we actually pull the bezel off from the front housing. Again, the main concern is going to be those cables down at the bottom. Other than that, it's not too tough. I made it a lot more difficult than it should be because I tried to remove the glass separately. And as you'll see later on in the video, that is going to be something that requires a completely different technique, if nothing else. I'm not even sure it's going to be practical to remove the glass only on this one. I'll find out on my next project, which should be coming up in the next couple days. So I'll get back to you on that. But for the time being, you will want to lift the rear housing off. Again, you'll see that I'm fighting a little bit of adhesive up there at the top. And we can kind of pull that away from the rest of the phone. And now we have a series of cables and antenna wires that we're going to disconnect, including the cameras, front and rear facing, the display, battery, and so forth. First thing I did was unplug the battery there. You can see the phone is now powered off. That's always the first thing that we want to do. These antenna wires are particularly small, so I wasn't really able to get under them with this tool. I don't like to use metal tools down here, but in this case, I took a very small bladed driver and made sure that I was only prying under the metal portion of the antenna wire. You don't want to pry on the plastic part of the wire itself. You can actually detach those wires. And I imagine at this time, it's probably a little tough to get a hold of a replacement set. So do be very careful when you disconnect those. So we've got our display disconnected. Now we're going to proceed with the front-facing camera and make sure that you unplug all of the cables that are shown here in the video. You want to make sure you're not prying against the logic board with something still attached. Headset jack over here, along with the proximity sensor. Kind of an interesting interface. That cable actually wraps around the top end of the speaker, and that's another area you probably want to be careful of when you're prying the phone out of the housing. Or, I'm sorry, when you're prying the glass off of the front. Now, the logic board will lift up from the top end, but there's actually a cable connected down here to the charging port. This one is fairly durable. I didn't want to go in from this angle because you can kind of put pressure on those surrounding components. So what I did is I went over here to the side, and this is a pretty solid piece of metal here on the back of it. You can just pop that off. All right, so the front-facing camera will come right out, no problem. You can just lift that off. And then we're going to want to apply a little bit of heat up here to this cable. Again, it's just a very interesting orientation that they have at the top. The battery stuck in there like super glue. It's kind of like a 5S or a 5C iPhone. We'll get back to that later. If you go right under the corner edge of this material, this little piece right here, you can actually lift up that microphone. And then you'll see here it just kind of unravels around the top end of the frame, and the whole earpiece will come out of the phone. All right, so this time I chose to use a hot plate because, again, my intention was to remove the glass, and they use some really heavy-duty adhesive underneath this thing, and I wanted to remove the battery, but the battery is really the only thing that gives you any stability behind the AMOLED. So chances are if you remove that battery and you try to pry between the glass and the AMOLED, I think you're going to crack it most of the time. On the other hand, if you use the hot plate, the battery tends to get very warm. So it was kind of like not a good way to win on this one, but I did experiment with it a little bit just to see how far I could get. And I made it about halfway through the screen before it cracked, and I expect that to be the outcome in most cases. We might be able to use this type of hot plate with the molybdenum wire and get between it, but again, I'm pretty sure they used an OCA, so it's some real sticky stuff, and probably not going to have a very high success rate for most people. Now, if you don't want to watch this part, you can skip ahead a couple of minutes to where I'm actually starting to get the glass off. You can take the entire glass and the AMOLED off together. You don't need to separate them. That's just the way it ended up on this particular attempt. But you will be able to see what's going on down at the bottom with the cables, so you might want to stick around and see how this comes off. So you can see the glass is lifting up there like it would on an S4. The only thing is, as you start working your way across, it gets really, really sticky. It's not even so much the technique as far as getting between the glass and the AMOLED as it is the resistance that you get when you're pushing the card through. At the right temperature, an S3 or an S4, you can slide the card through almost like butter, but that is definitely not the case on this phone, and it heats up very fast, so it doesn't take long on the hot plate to get this thing almost warm enough to burn your hand. All right, so let's go ahead and remove the battery. Again, at this point it was getting a little warm, so I don't want to damage the battery, but once this comes off, there's just nothing to really hold that screen in place. So you want to also take it easy on this. It's very easy to puncture batteries that have this kind of adhesive. You also want to avoid bending them, because if you bend them enough, they can rupture. So just kind of very carefully work your way back and forth. You'll see there's some super, super sticky adhesive under here. So just take your time and with a little bit of heat, not too much, and patience, you should be able to get through this. All right, so there we've got the battery separated from the mid frame, if you want to call it that. There's not much of a frame on the inside. I went ahead and plugged the battery back in with the board just to make sure that the screen was still working. But that's about as far as I got. I went through here a little bit more and I started hearing cracking noises, and it was not the glass, it was actually the AMOLED. And of course, once you get one tiny crack in these things, they just kind of fall apart on the inside. So unfortunately, no success with getting the glass off this time. I will try that again in the future, but for now what we're going to do is just go ahead and remove everything. So again, if you take a look, it's a little hard to see, but as I warmed up the bottom here and pried the glass away, you've got to make sure that you separate those back and menu keys from the glass. They have adhesive holding them in place right up against the glass, and you don't want to slice through those cables. So it's a little hard to describe, but you really have to kind of look down inside here and make sure that you're going between the glass and the cable itself. Can be a little tricky. Even with the playing card, it's a little tough to get in there. So later on, I switched over to a dulled razor blade. And again, the big danger here is just slicing through those cables. It's so easy to damage them. Now you can kind of get a look here in just a second at how these cables wrap around the bottom. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and proceed to remove the AMOLED. You can do this easily by prying from the back side of the phone. There's a very thin space between the back of the AMOLED and this, again, mid-frame, if you want to call it that, that's over on one side. And if you go under here with the playing card, you'll see shortly that I actually went all the way through and it'll pop out from the back. So not too tough at this point. And again, you can do this all at once with the glass, but I kind of preferred it this way because I could be a lot more careful down around the buttons at the bottom. Just a little bit awkward getting that cable to come through. Plenty of adhesive on this thing. I just want to be careful not to bend the frame. That's why I'm kind of taking my time using some heat and a very thin tool to pry with, just a playing card. That way we have a nice straight frame when we get finished. All right, so that's pretty much it. One thing I want to point out, there is a little rubber piece here for the proximity sensor. So make sure that you don't lose this. It's got to go in the frame. If it doesn't, your proximity sensor will not work. And chances are, so that's going to be a little tough to track down something to replace it. From here, we're just going to apply some adhesive to the frame, and there's probably some adhesive behind the AMOLED on this, but I like to go down at the bottom and the top. Anywhere you don't see buttons or holes, this red tape adhesive works great. And then we'll put it all back together, just the reverse of the disassembly. If you found the video helpful, hit the like button and feel free to share it on the social network platform of your choice. Check out some of my recent repair and product review videos, and visit us on the web at gocellphonerepair.com. Thanks for watching.